I've always hated thunderstorms. The way the sky darkens, the deafening crashes of thunder, and the blinding flashes of lightning always made me feel uneasy. The sound of rain slamming against the windows wasn't soothing, it was suffocating, trapping me inside with nothing but my racing thoughts. But on that night, during the worst storm I had ever seen, my fear of thunderstorms became something much worse. I was home alone. My parents were away on a business trip, leaving me in the house for the week. The house felt unusually quiet, save for the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards as the wind howled outside. The forecast had warned of heavy rain, strong winds, and frequent lightning strikes. I sat in my dimly lit living room, watching the storm unfold through the large front window. The street outside was barely visible through the torrential downpour, the streetlights flickering with every flash of lightning. The sound of thunder rattled the windows, and I pulled my blanket tighter around myself, feeling strangely alone in the large house. I had spent the past few days enjoying the peace, but tonight, something about the storm made the house feel emptier than usual. I tried to focus on my book, but the wind howling outside made it hard to concentrate. I was on FaceTime with my best friend, Zoe, trying to distract myself from the storm. We were laughing about something trivial when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement through the window. A man, standing outside in the rain. He was just barely visible in the dim light, his clothes soaked through. I frowned, shifting my phone slightly to get a better look. Zoe noticed my distraction. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing," I murmured. "Just some guy outside." Zoe joked about me always being paranoid, and I laughed it off. The storm was bad. Maybe he was just looking for shelter. I shrugged, turned away from the window, and kept talking, pushing the thought aside. It wasn't until later, after I hung up and was getting ready for bed, that I noticed something strange. A man, dressed in dark, soaked clothes, walking slowly along the sidewalk. His posture was off, stiff, deliberate, as if he was surveying the houses. His head turned slightly, and for a brief moment, I thought he was looking directly at my house. I felt a chill creep down my spine. It wasn't unusual to see people walking in the rain, but something about the way he moved unsettled me. He wasn't rushing to get out of the storm. He wasn't looking for shelter. He was looking for something. Or someone. I watched as the man stopped in front of the house across the street. The Johnsons lived there, an elderly couple who usually went to bed early. Their lights were off, and their car wasn't in the driveway. The man stepped onto their porch. Another bolt of lightning split the sky, and for a second, I saw him more clearly. He was wearing a hood, his face partially obscured, but his posture was unmistakable. He was trying the door handle. My pulse quickened. I waited, hoping, praying that it was locked. The door didn't open. The man hesitated, then stepped back. But instead of leaving, he turned his head slowly, scanning the neighborhood. Then he looked directly at me. I froze. Had he seen me watching? I was sitting in the dim glow of my living room lamp, partially hidden behind the curtain, but the sudden eye contact made my heart pound. The man took a step off the porch and disappeared into the darkness between houses. I grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. I debated calling the police. Would they even take it seriously? A guy standing on a porch wasn't exactly a crime. But something in my gut told me this was more than just someone seeking shelter from the storm. Then, a loud crash echoed through the neighborhood. It came from the back of the Johnsons' house. I sprang to my feet. The noise had been unmistakable, glass shattering. My stomach twisted. He had broken in. I dialed 911, forcing myself to stay calm as I relayed what I had seen. The dispatcher assured me that an officer was on the way, but with the storm raging, response times might be delayed. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and moved cautiously toward my own back door. From my position, I had a partial view of the Johnsons' backyard. The rain made it nearly impossible to see clearly, but I could just make out movement through their kitchen window. He was inside. I had no idea if the Johnsons were home. The thought of them confronting this intruder sent a surge of panic through me. I had to do something. Keeping my phone in one hand, I crept onto my porch, staying in the shadows. The storm masked my footsteps as I moved closer to their yard. My mind was racing. What if he was armed? What if he saw me? Then I heard another noise. Footsteps. But they weren't coming from inside the Johnsons' house. They were coming from behind me. I spun around, my flashlight cutting through the rain. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, I thought I saw another figure standing near my fence. But the storm made everything a blur, and by the time I steadied my light, the figure was gone. Was I imagining things? Or was there more than one intruder? I turned back toward the Johnsons' house. The kitchen light inside flickered on. The intruder was moving through the house. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. The front door opened, and he stepped out. I ducked behind the side of my house, my breath shallow. The intruder was now standing on the Johnsons' front porch, looking out at the storm. He hesitated, then pulled up his hood tighter and walked, not toward the street, but directly toward my house. I gripped my phone, whispering to the dispatcher. "He's coming this way." "Stay inside," she instructed. "Lock your doors. Officers are close." I bolted inside, locking every door and turning off the lights. My heart pounded as I peered through the blinds. The man was now standing in my driveway. Lightning flashed. For the first time, I saw his face. I knew him. Then, flashing red and blue lights cut through the darkness. The police had arrived. The man turned, walking briskly away, but within seconds, officers had him on the ground. I stepped onto my porch, watching as they restrained him. One officer approached me. "He's wanted for multiple break-ins across the county," she said. "You did the right thing calling us." I looked at the Johnsons' house. The door was wide open, the broken window visible from the street. If I hadn't been watching, who knows what might have happened. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Being alone in this house suddenly felt different, more vulnerable. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain continued to pour, but it felt different now. Less soothing, more suffocating. I kept thinking about that moment when he looked at me from across the street. How long had he been watching? Had he planned this for days, weeks? And what if the police hadn't arrived in time? What would he have done next? The thought made my skin crawl. The next morning, I called my parents. "When are you coming back?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I think we need a security system just in case." It was the summer of 2023, and I never liked driving at night, let alone in a thunderstorm. The rain came down in heavy sheets, hammering against my windshield, making it nearly impossible to see the road ahead. The wipers struggled to keep up, and every few seconds, a bright flash of lightning would momentarily illuminate the deserted highway before plunging everything back into darkness. I was heading home after a long business trip. The flight had been delayed due to the storm, and by the time I landed, it was past midnight. My rental car was the only vehicle on the road, a lone traveler cutting through the relentless downpour. The GPS said I had another hour to go before reaching my small town, but the storm was getting worse. I debated pulling over and waiting it out at a motel, but the thought of sleeping in a dingy roadside room didn't appeal to me. I just wanted to be home. Then I saw something on the side of the road, a car, hazard lights blinking through the curtain of rain. Someone was stranded. As I slowed down, I could make out the shape of the car, an older sedan, pulled onto the shoulder. I hesitated. Stopping for a stranger in the middle of a storm wasn't exactly the safest idea, but what if they were in real trouble? I pulled over and rolled down my window just enough to call out, "Hey, do you need help?" A figure emerged from the driver's seat, a man, tall and thin, his hood pulled up to shield him from the rain. He jogged toward my car, and for a brief second, my gut told me to drive away. But before I could react, he was at my window, dripping wet, his face partially obscured by the shadows. "My car died," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "My phone's dead too. Can I get a ride to the next gas station?" I hesitated. Something about him felt off, but leaving someone stranded in this weather felt wrong. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the passenger door. As soon as he got in, I regretted my decision. The air in the car felt heavier, the scent of wet clothes and something else. Something metallic filled my nostrils. "Thanks, man," he muttered, shaking water from his sleeves. "Didn't think anyone would stop." "Yeah," I said, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Where's the nearest gas station?" "About 10 miles ahead," he said. "Just keep going straight." I nodded and focused on the road, but my senses were on high alert. Something about his posture, the way he kept glancing at me from the corner of his eye, made my stomach twist. Then, in the next flash of lightning, I saw something that made my blood run cold. His hands. They were covered in dried blood. Panic surged through me. My mind raced with possibilities. Was he hurt, or had he hurt someone else? My grip on the wheel tightened as I forced myself to stay calm. "Are you okay?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He glanced at me, then down at his hands as if realizing they were visible. Slowly, he wiped them on his jeans and gave a dry chuckle. "Yeah, just an accident earlier." I nodded stiffly. The gas station was still miles away, and I was stuck with him in my car, that in the middle of nowhere, in a raging storm. Then, he reached into his jacket. I reacted before I could think. I slammed the brakes. The car skidded on the wet road, tires screeching as we spun slightly. The man yelped as his head hit the dashboard. Before he could recover, I shoved the door open and lunged out into the storm. I didn't care that I was in the middle of the highway. I just ran. The rain was blinding, the wind nearly knocking me off my feet, but I didn't stop. I heard the car door slam behind me, heard him shouting, but I didn't turn back. There were no other cars in sight, no houses, just an endless stretch of road and the trees lining it. Then, headlights appeared in the distance. I waved frantically, stumbling toward the oncoming vehicle, praying they would stop. The truck screeched to a halt just as I collapsed onto the wet pavement. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the shape of the man still standing by my rental car, watching. I woke up in a hospital bed, my head pounding. A police officer sat beside me, his expression serious. "You're lucky," he said. "The truck driver called it in just in time." "Did they catch him?" I croaked. The officer hesitated. "We found your car. The guy was gone, but..." He pulled out a plastic evidence bag and placed it on the table beside me. Inside was a blood-stained knife. "We ran the plates on the abandoned sedan," the officer continued. "It was reported stolen, and an hour before you picked him up, a gas station clerk 15 miles back was found dead." A shiver ran down my spine. "If you hadn't gotten out of that car," the officer said, "we'd be having a very different conversation right now." Every time a storm rolls in, I think about that night, about the choice I made to stop, about how close I came to being his next victim. The man was never caught, and sometimes, when thunder rumbles in the distance, I wonder if he's still out there, walking the roads, waiting for the next person to make the same mistake I did.